Hey folks, happy Tuesday. Today's the day that we share a nugget of wisdom from the book of Proverbs. Today we're going to be looking at Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 11. And there Solomon writes to us, he says, "A fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards." Have you ever known anyone who you might say that, so-and-so, he never had an unspoken thought? Or you might say of another person, whatever comes into her mind comes right out her mouth without passing through her brain. Sometimes we've met people like that, and sometimes we may be guilty of the same thing ourselves. I've known people like that, and they're not necessarily bad people. But the problem is that they seldom take the time to consider the impact of their words before they speak. I knew a Christian lady who was known for this kind of thing. She was very blunt spoken, and people would take offense at the things she said. It wasn't necessarily what she said, but the way she said them. And when someone would say something to her about it, she would be genuinely shocked that someone got offended or was offended by what she said. She was not, again, an intentionally mean lady, but her words often came out that way. Others, even though their words are not necessarily offensive, they tend to say everything that is on their mind, both good and bad. The book of Proverbs refers to someone like that as a prating fool, someone that just continually babbles and prates and talks sometimes it seems like people just want to talk because they like the sound of their own voice. Or whatever it is, they can't stand a dead space or any quiet time. They've got to fill it always with talking and talking and talking. And so, the book of Proverbs refers to someone like that as a prating fool, and we'll probably do one of these on the prating fool at some point. But what we're really looking at here today is not that. Yes, it's important that we not just say every single thing that ever comes into our mind, but a wise man, it says, keepeth it in until afterward. You see, the wise man holds back from revealing all that is in his mind. He takes the time to process his thoughts, holding back from speaking until he has ordered his thoughts. He then may or may not speak what is on his mind. A wise man keeps himself from offending others by carefully considering the impact of his words. He also considers whether or not his words are even worth sharing with others. There are sometimes I'll think a thought and it'll strike me as funny, but then when I think about it, I think, if I was to say this to someone else, they may not take it funny, and it may be offensive to them. And so you got to be careful. And so when you have a thought that you're thinking about sharing, we need to ask ourselves, and here's what the wise man does. And if I was only a wise man, I would do this more often. But ask yourself, will speaking my mind edify or encourage another person? Or would saying this unnecessarily offend? Sometimes people are going to be offended at our words when we speak the truth to them. But and we may need to offend them on those occasions, but are my words going to do so unnecessarily? Ask the question, is this thing that I'm about to say, is it true? If it's not, keep your mouth shut. Is it kind? If it's not kind, then certainly not. If it's not loving, and if it's really not necessary. So the wise man takes all of this and more into consideration before he ever opens his mouth. Notice what Solomon says over in Proverbs chapter 30 and verse 32. He says there, "If thou hast done foolishly in lifting up thyself, or if thou hast thought evil." Lay your hand on your mouth. Jesus said this in Matthew chapter 12, verses 36 and 37. "But I say unto you, that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof in the day of judgment." Think about that. That's something to think about before you open your mouth. Goes on, he says, for by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. James talks about the tongue, and he talks about the mouth. In James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20, he says, wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, and slow to speak, and slow to anger, for the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Again, if we speak too quickly, we may say the wrong thing. We may anger someone else, or we may speak in anger. Again, I may have an angry thought that comes into my mind, but it's probably best to keep it to myself, to keep it and let it go, really. But do not utter those words, because once those words have left your mouth, you cannot ever get them back. James chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. The whole chapter, really, of chapter 3 deals with the sins of the tongue, but notice what he says there in the first two verses. He says, my brethren, be not many masters or teachers, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation, for in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. And so the wise man keeps it in till afterwards. The fool utters everything that is on his mind. The wise man keeps his mouth shut until the time to speak is right, until he's decided that what he has to say is worth saying. And so let us learn from the wisdom of King Solomon, and let us learn that sometimes we need to be doing this instead of doing this.